Hello students. Today we will have a brief discussion about Unit 3 in Computer Organization, which is Memory Organization. As you know that we have already finished our 4 units, that is Unit 1, 2, 4 and 5. So the third unit is about memory organization. So I would like to start the class with a description of the topics what we are going to cover in this unit. So as you can see, the first topic what we are going to see is memory hierarchy. In this topic we will try to list out what are the different types of memories we have and how can we place them in a hierarchy. And then we'll move on to the next topic, which is main memory. So in this topic we will talk about the importance of the main memory and what are the different types of main memories we have. And in this main memory, we also talk about the RAM and ROM chips, because main memory is nothing but the RAM. Along with that, we will also talk about how is that RAM chip and a ROM chip. We will study the structures of it. And then we will try to connect these memories, that is your RAM and ROM, with the CPU and look at one architecture. So that will be your fourth topic. And then we'll move on to the next type of memory, which is associate memory. So this is another type of memory which is there. So we will, as we go ahead in the coming lectures, we will talk about what is associate memory. And then our next topic, which is sixth topic, will be your cache memory, another very important memory. So many of them are familiar with this memory, I guess. So in this cache memory we have some mapping techniques. So that mapping techniques, in that again we have some three types: direct mapping, associative and set associative. So as we go ahead we will talk about this types of mapping which is done in the cache memory. And then there are few terms when we are talking about cache memory which we need to get familiar. So one term is your hit ratio, miss ratio and access time. So these when we cover the topic we will see these concepts. And the last topic in the unit is virtual memory. So this is another type of memory which is very helpful in the computer. So as we go ahead, this is how the flow of the topics will be there. So today we'll start with our first topic, which is memory hierarchy. So let us start with the definition of a memory. So as you know, memory is a storage device which stores the data and programs. So this memory is nothing but it is a storage device. It is used to store the data and the programs used by the programmer or the user. Always it is not necessary that all the data and programmers of the user are used by the processor at one point of time. Only few data or programs are used by the processor at one point of time. So not all the programs are used by the processor at the same time. So in that context, we can divide the memory into two types. One is your main memory and the auxiliary memory. So the programs what the processor requires at one point of time are being stored in the main memory, whereas the rest of the programs are something which are present in the auxiliary memory. So only the main programs whatever are used by the processor at one point of time is something which is saved in the main memory. The rest of all the programs, which may be system programs or the user programs, all those are present in the auxiliary memory. So in other words, we can also call this as a primary memory and this as a secondary memory, which we are very much familiar with. So in this context, we can list out the different types of memory which are present in the computer in a memory hierarchy and look how do they differ from each other. So this is the memory hierarchy. So as you can see, The memory device what I have placed in this memory hierarchy is your magnetic disk or magnetic tapes. So in this category of the memory, all the auxiliary devices that is come under this category. For example, your hard disk, and if you are trying to include an external hard disk apart from the hard disk which is already there in your computer, so that comes under this category. And then your USB ports, that is your pen drives, etc., etc., your CDs or DVDs, your floppies, all these come under these magnetic disk and magnetic tapes. So as you can see, the capacity of these magnetic disk and tapes depends upon the user's choice. It can keep on varying. How much ever you want, how much bigger you want, you can go ahead by using in this magnetic disk and tapes. Now coming to the next category, on top of magnetic disk and tapes, we have main memory. So when I talk about main memory, I am saying it is nothing but your RAM, which is random access memory. So this main memory is the memory which is in direct contact with the processor. So when you talk about the capacity of the main memory, it is little smaller than this magnetic disk and tapes. Next category of the memory is your cache memory. So this cache memory is another type of memory which lies above the main memory. So when I talk about this cache memory, this memory we generally refer it as the fast memory. So architecture point of view, if I have to place a cache memory, this is something which is lying between a processor and a main memory. This is where your cache memory is. Why do we generally place a cache memory in the middle of main memory and the processor? Is to speed up the processing. When you talk about the capacity, main memory has little higher capacity, but whereas your cache memory is very much low. So processor handing over the program from the cache memory to the processor is faster when compared to the main memory and the processor. So in the coming classes we'll explore the cache memory a little more. So for introduction purpose, I think this would be sufficient. So that is about your cache memory. It's the fastest memory. Then we'll move on to the next category, which is called registers. So by now everybody might have an idea what is a register, because in the previous units we have explored the registers a lot. So when you talk about the capacity of a register, the register is nothing but it can hold hardly one word of data at one point of time. So if you look at the capacity also, if you try to locate the register, it is something which is present inside the processor. So this is how we can list the memory hierarchy. So there are few parameters which differ among all of them. So those parameters are nothing but cost, capacity, and access time. So if you look at this hierarchy, as you come from top to bottom, that is from the registers to the magnetic disk, there is a decrease in the cost. The cost decreases because when you talk about the register is something which is directly present in the processor. So if you have to purchase a register, you need to purchase a processor. So the cost of the processor is high. But whereas your cost of a CD or a DVD or a pen drive is comparatively very less. So that is what is the factor which varies from top to bottom, which is decrease in cost. Next parameter which we talk here is the capacity. The capacity, if you look at in this hierarchy, as you come from top to bottom, there is increase in the capacity. A register can hardly hold one word of data. Cache memory, if I have to say, maybe just as an example, it may hardly handle some 10 or 20 programs at a time. Main memory can hold 100 to 200 programs, but whereas your magnetic disk and tapes, it can hold a lot of data. So that is how we can say it differs. So the capacity, as you come from top to bottom, it increases. Next factor which increases is the access time. So from top to bottom, if you see, there is an increase in the access time. Now what do you mean by the access time? Let me define the access time. It is nothing but the time taken by the processor to identify a particular program in the memory. So it is nothing but time taken by the processor to identify a program in the memory is called as an access time. So the registers are something which are present inside the processor only. So identifying a program or a particular data will be very easy for the processor when you talk about registers. But when you talk about your auxiliary memory, CD, DVDs or floppies, it has to search for that particular program. So it is very difficult. So the access time is something which increases from top to bottom. So this is how we can talk about the memory hierarchy. In the coming classes, we'll talk about the one type of memory in the memory hierarchy, which is your main memory, in little more detail. Thank you.